Elon Musk disguises himself as homeless to test a bank. You won't believe what happens at the end. A man in tattered clothes shuffled into a luxury bank in Beverly Hills, drawing scornful glances from the wealthy clientele. Little did they know they had just dismissed one of the richest men in the world. The afternoon sun bathed the streets of Beverly Hills in a golden glow, the palm-lined avenues buzzing with life as luxury cars slid past like silent specters of wealth. Here, affluence wasn't just a way of life. It was the only life that mattered. Among the glittering storefronts and towering banks, a figure walked unnoticed, blending into the background like a misplaced brushstroke on an otherwise flawless canvas. His clothes were worn, frayed at the edges, stained in places that spoke of long days and even longer nights. His once white sneakers were scuffed beyond recognition, his faded baseball cap pulled low over a face shadowed by an unkempt beard. To the passing elite, he was just another piece of the city's scenery, one of those people. But this wasn't just any man. This was Elon Musk. And today, he wasn't walking into a boardroom or onto a red carpet. Today, he was walking in a First Haven bank, a place where the air itself seemed to hum with exclusivity. He paused in front of the towering glass doors, their polished surface reflecting back the image of someone society had forgotten. A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Perfect. He stepped inside. Immediately, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations faltered. Hushed whispers danced in the air. The marble floors gleamed beneath his feet, and the distant aroma of freshly brewed espresso mingled with the faint scent of expensive cologne. Patrons clad in tailored suits and designer dresses stole sideways glances, their gazes filled with a silent, shared question. What is he doing here? At the reception desk, a woman with meticulously styled blonde hair glanced up. Her name tag read Rebecca. Her smile was tight, forced, and entirely devoid of warmth. "Can I help you?" Her voice carried the kind of politeness that barely concealed its edge, the kind reserved for people who didn't belong. Elon nodded, adjusting the cap on his head. "I'd like to open a checking account." Rebecca blinked once, twice. Then, with a well-practiced grace, she pulled her expression back into a mask of forced civility. "Our minimum deposit is $500. Do you have the necessary funds with you today?" Her gaze drifted down, lingering on his tattered jacket, the threadbare fabric telling her everything she thought she needed to know. Elon reached into his pocket and produced a crumpled $20 bill. He placed it on the counter without a word. For a moment, there was silence. Then Rebecca let out a short, clipped laugh. Not the kind born from amusement, but the kind that cuts. "I'm afraid that won't be enough." She tapped a manicured nail against the counter. "Perhaps you should try a different institution, one more suited to your circumstances." The rejection was swift, effortless, delivered without a second thought. Around him, whispers stirred once more, punctuated by the occasional stifled chuckle. Elon absorbed it all, the dismissive glances, the way people shifted away as though his very presence tainted the pristine air of the bank. And yet, not everyone looked through him. At a desk in the corner, a young woman in her early 20s, dark curls tucked into a neat bun, watched him with something that almost resembled concern. Her name tag read Emma. Unlike the others, her eyes didn't hold disdain, but rather hesitation, as if she were wrestling with something inside herself. Before Elon could consider it further, a voice cut through his thoughts. "Sir, if you don't have the required funds, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." A security guard, broad-shouldered and impatient, loomed nearby. Elon nodded, the corners of his lips twitching in an almost imperceptible smirk. Without protest, he turned and walked toward the exit, but not before glancing once more at Emma. Their eyes met, and in that fleeting moment, he saw something different. A seed of doubt, a hint of humanity. Stepping back into the blazing California sun, Elon adjusted his cap and exhaled. He had come to test the boundaries of perception, to see firsthand the gap between those who had everything and those society deemed invisible. And so far, the results were predictable. But something told him this was only the beginning. Elon sat down on a worn-out bench across the street from the bank, the heat pressing down on him like an invisible weight. He watched as sleek sports cars purred by, their occupants oblivious to his presence. A businessman in a sharp navy suit stepped out of the bank, laughing into his phone, his Rolex catching the sun in a blinding flash. Elon chuckled to himself. Money, status, power. The world revolved around these things, and he knew it better than anyone. But what if, for just a moment, those things were stripped away? What would be left? He had his answer inside First Haven Bank: dismissal, judgment, and rejection. But there was something else too, something he couldn't ignore. Emma. She'd been different. Not much, but enough. There was a crack in the armor, a flicker of doubt in her eyes that suggested she hadn't completely bought into the system she served. And that intrigued him. As he sat there, lost in thought, the bank's heavy glass doors swung open again. Emma stepped out, clutching a brown paper bag in one hand and her phone in the other. She glanced around nervously before making her way toward a shaded bench a few feet away from him. Elon watched, amused. She sat down, hesitating for a moment before reaching into the bag and pulling out a sandwich. She unwrapped it slowly, her gaze darting toward him once, then twice. Finally, she took a deep breath. You know, she said, not looking at him directly, they're never going to let you open an account. Elon tilted his head, feigning ignorance. Why not? Thought banks were for everyone. Emma let out a short laugh, shaking her head. Not this one. First Haven isn't exactly known for inclusivity. She paused, then added, honestly, you'd be better off somewhere else. Elon leaned back, stretching his legs out in front of him. Maybe, but maybe I like a challenge. Emma eyed him curiously, taking another bite of her sandwich. You don't seem like the type to give up easily. I'm not. Elon smiled faintly. Neither are you. She blinked, caught off guard. What makes you say that? He nodded toward the bank behind them. If you were, you wouldn't still be working there. Emma's face tightened, and for a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something, but instead, she just stared down at her food. Elon let the silence stretch, giving her space. Finally, she sighed. It's complicated, she admitted. I thought I could make a difference, you know? Help people. But it's not like that. Not here. Elon studied her carefully. So why stay? Emma hesitated, then shrugged. Bills. Responsibilities. And I guess I keep hoping things will change. He nodded slowly. Hope's a funny thing. She laughed softly. Yeah, it is. They sat there for a while, the sounds of the city filling the space between them. After a few moments, Emma glanced at him again. You don't really look homeless, you know, she said cautiously. Elon smirked. Thanks, I think. I mean it. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. Something about you feels different. Elon's eyes twinkled with amusement. I get that a lot. Emma narrowed her eyes. Who are you, really? Elon leaned back, looking up at the sky. Just someone trying to figure out how the world really works. She studied him for a long moment, then stood up. Well, good luck with that. She tossed the empty sandwich wrapper into a nearby trash can and hesitated. And I hope you find what you're looking for. He watched her walk away, disappearing back into the bank, the weight of the institution pressing down on her shoulders. Elon leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, a slow grin spreading across his face. He'd found what he was looking for, and he wasn't done yet. The next morning, Elon was back on the same bench, his tattered clothes hanging off him like remnants of another life. The Beverly Hills sun was relentless, but he barely noticed. His focus was locked on the bank's entrance, watching as the staff arrived one by one, stepping out of luxury cars and slipping through the gleaming glass doors like they were walking into a fortress. And then there she was, Emma. She moved with the same quiet hesitation, her eyes darting around, as if she were carrying a secret she couldn't quite define. As she approached the door, she caught sight of him. Their eyes met, and for the briefest of moments, something flickered between them. Recognition, maybe even understanding. But then, just as quickly, it was gone, and she disappeared inside. Elon stood, stretching his aching muscles, and walked toward the entrance. The security guard from yesterday, a towering wall of muscle named Grant, was stationed near the door, his expression hardening the moment he spotted Elon approaching. "Not this again," Grant grumbled, stepping in front of him like a human barricade. "I told you yesterday, buddy. No funds, no account." Elon smiled casually. "I figured I'd try my luck." Grant crossed his arms. "You don't have any luck here. Move along." Just then, the door swung open and Rebecca, the receptionist with the ice-cold demeanor, appeared. Her eyes locked onto Elon with a look of sheer irritation. "Sir," she said, her voice dripping with forced politeness, "I believe we've already discussed this. You're wasting our time." Elon held up the same crumpled $20 bill from yesterday and placed it on the counter in front of her. "I believe in starting small," he said smoothly. "Every great empire starts with a single brick." Rebecca's lips pressed into a thin line. "And I believe you're in the wrong place." A voice interrupted from behind them. "Maybe not." Elon turned to see Emma standing there, her arms crossed, an unmistakable tension in her stance. Rebecca shot her a withering glare. "Emma, we don't cater to—" "I'll handle this," Emma cut in, stepping forward. Rebecca raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "You?" Emma nodded. "Yes. We should at least hear him out." Rebecca scoffed but stepped back, rolling her eyes. "Fine. Waste your time if you want." She turned and walked off, her heels clicking against the polished marble floors. Emma led Elon toward her desk, her voice low. "What are you doing?" she whispered, glancing around nervously. "Trying to open a checking account," Elon said, his eyes twinkling with amusement. Emma sighed, pulling up the system on her computer. "Look, I'm going to level with you. I can't do much. The bank's policies are strict." Elon leaned in slightly. "Strict, but not impossible." She hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Even if I could, the minimum deposit is still $500. He grinned, tapping the $20 bill on the desk. "And yet, here I am." Emma bit her lip, clearly conflicted. "If I do this, I could get in serious trouble." Elon's voice softened. "And if you don't?" Emma looked around the bank, taking in the marble floors, the glint of wealth reflected in every corner. She thought of Rebecca, of Mr. Hollis, the bank manager who barely acknowledged her existence. She thought of the dozens of times she'd felt invisible here, much like the man sitting in front of her now. She made a decision. "I'm going to see what I can do," she said quietly, tapping away at the keyboard. Elon leaned back, watching her with a faint smile. "I knew I liked you." As Emma worked, she felt the weight of every glance in the room, the silent judgment of her colleagues. But beneath it all, there was something else, something that felt like defiance. Like maybe, just maybe, she could do something that actually mattered. A few minutes later, she printed out a slip of paper and slid it across the desk to Elon. "Congratulations," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have an account." Elon picked up the paper, examining it with an exaggerated seriousness. "I must say, I feel quite important." He glanced up at her. "Thank you." Emma swallowed hard, nodding. "Don't thank me yet. This might come back to bite me." Elon tucked the paper into his pocket and stood up. "It won't. Trust me." As he turned to leave, Emma called after him. "Hey, why this bank? Why not somewhere else?" Elon paused at the door, looking back with a smirk. "Because sometimes the places that seem the most untouchable are the ones that need change the most." With that, he stepped outside, disappearing into the crowded street. Emma sat there for a long moment, staring at the empty space he'd left behind. She didn't know who he was or what game he was playing, but something told her that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The following morning, Emma arrived at the bank earlier than usual, but she wasn't the only one. Through the glass doors, she spotted him, Elon, sitting on the same bench across the street, watching, observing, waiting. She sighed, her heart pounding as yesterday's decision replayed in her mind. What have I done? Opening that account for him had been a gamble, a step outside the rigid policy's first haven enforced with an iron grip, a risk she wasn't sure she was ready to face. "Good morning, Emma." Rebecca's voice pierced through the tension like a knife, saccharine but laced with suspicion. "Busy day ahead?" Emma forced a smile. "Morning, Rebecca." She tried to sound casual, but her fingers trembled slightly as she typed in her login credentials. Rebecca leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. You really shouldn't waste your time on people who don't belong here. Her eyes flicked to the street, where Elon still sat, hunched over with his hands in his pockets. It's bad for business. Emma clenched her jaw. I was just doing my job. Rebecca smirked. Sure you were. And with that, she strutted off, leaving Emma simmering. As the morning dragged on, Emma found it harder to concentrate. She kept glancing toward the bench outside, half expecting Elon to disappear. But he didn't. He stayed, like a persistent question that refused to be ignored. By noon, curiosity gnawed at her too fiercely to resist. On her lunch break, she slipped outside and crossed the street, her heels clicking against the pavement. Elon looked up as she approached, his signature smirk already in place. Couldn't resist, huh? Emma folded her arms. What are you doing here again? Elon leaned back, stretching his arms across the back of the bench. Waiting. For what? For you. Emma blinked, caught off guard. Why me? He studied her for a long moment, then said, Because you see things differently. And that's rare. She scoffed, shaking her head. Look, whatever you're trying to do, it's not going to work. This bank doesn't care about people like you. It cares about numbers. Elon's smile didn't falter. People are numbers until someone changes the equation. Emma sighed, rubbing her temples. You talk like you're some kind of philosopher in disguise. Elon's eyes twinkled. Maybe I am. Emma exhaled, glancing back at the bank where Rebecca stood watching from the window. I took a big risk yesterday. I know, Elon said, his voice softer now. And I won't forget it. She hesitated, then asked, Who are you really? Elon leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Let's just say, I know what it feels like to be overlooked. Emma frowned. Somehow, I doubt that. He grinned. Perception is funny, isn't it? Before she could respond, the sound of footsteps behind her made her spin around. It was Mr. Hollis, the bank manager, his face an unreadable mask of authority. Emma, he said, his voice clipped. A word? Her stomach dropped. Of course, sir. Elon stood up, brushing imaginary dust from his clothes. I should get going anyway. Thanks for the chat, Emma. As he walked away, Mr. Hollis watched him carefully. I trust we won't have any more distractions? Emma forced a smile. No, sir. But even as she said it, she knew the story was far from over. Later that afternoon, Emma's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Meet me at the park, Elon's voice said on the other end. Trust me. Against her better judgment, Emma found herself walking to the park after her shift. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Elon was already there, leaning against a lamppost. You don't stop, do you? She said, crossing her arms. Persistence is key, Elon replied with a wink. Emma sighed. Look, whatever this is, it's getting risky. If they find out what I did, they won't, Elon interrupted. But what if I told you this is bigger than just opening an account? She frowned. What are you talking about? Elon pulled a neatly folded paper from his pocket and handed it to her. Read it. Emma unfolded the paper and scanned the contents. Her breath caught in her throat. This is your bank statement, she whispered. Elon grinned. Surprise. Her eyes widened as she read the numbers. Billions. The man standing before her, dressed in ragged clothes, rejected by her own bank, was one of the richest men in the world. Oh my God, she whispered. Yeah, Elon said casually. Turns out First Haven might have missed out on a pretty decent customer. Huh? Emma's mind raced, 100 questions flooding in at once. Why are you doing this? Why pretend to be? Because I wanted to see what really happens, Elon said, his voice serious now. Not as Elon Musk, just as some guy off the street. Emma stared at him, the reality sinking in. So this whole thing was a test, he confirmed. And guess what? They failed. Emma let out a slow breath. What now? Elon smiled. Now, we shake things up. How? He handed her a business card. Come work for me. Help me fix the system from the inside. Emma stared at the card, her heart pounding. This was insane. Completely insane. But deep down, she knew this was the opportunity of a lifetime. With a deep breath, she met his gaze. I'm in. Elon grinned. I thought you might say that. And just like that, everything changed. The following morning, Emma walked into First Haven Bank with a strange mix of nerves and anticipation. She glanced at the card Elon had given her last night, still tucked into the pocket of her blazer, its presence feeling heavier than it should. Was she really going to do this? Was she really about to walk away from everything she knew? Her thoughts were cut short when Rebecca's voice rang through the air, dripping with its usual condescension. "You're late, Emma." Again. Emma forced a smile, slipping behind her desk. "Traffic," she muttered. Rebecca shot her a sharp look, but didn't press further. Instead, she leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. I saw you talking to him yesterday." Emma stiffened. "Who?" Rebecca rolled her eyes. "The vagrant. You really shouldn't waste your time. These people are just looking for handouts." Emma felt a flicker of anger rise in her chest, but she swallowed it down. "I was just being polite." Rebecca smirked. "Sure you were." Emma turned to her computer, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed. She couldn't focus, not when the weight of what Elon had told her pressed down on her, like an invisible force. "Come work for me. Help me fix the system." It sounded so simple, and yet it was anything but. Before she could dwell on it further, the doors to the bank swung open, and there he was. Elon. But this time, he wasn't wearing the tattered clothes. This time he looked different. A crisp black suit, tailored to perfection, shoes polished to a mirror shine. His disheveled appearance was gone, replaced by the powerful presence the world knew all too well. A collective hush fell over the bank. Customers and employees alike turned to stare, whispering in hushed tones. Rebecca's eyes widened in shock. "Oh my God! Is that—" Emma didn't answer. Her heart pounded as Elon walked toward the front desk with the kind of confidence that couldn't be taught. He didn't even glance at Rebecca. Instead, his eyes locked onto Emma's. "Good morning, Emma," he said, his voice smooth, composed. Emma swallowed hard. "Mr. Musk." Rebecca nearly choked. "Musk? As in Elon Musk?" Elon smiled faintly. "In the flesh." Emma felt her face flush as Rebecca stumbled over her words. I'm so sorry, Mr. Musk. I had no idea." Elon waved a hand dismissively. "No need for that. I was just another customer yesterday, wasn't I?" Rebecca's face paled. "Yes, but well, if we had known." Elon's expression hardened slightly. "That's exactly the problem, isn't it?" Silence stretched uncomfortably across the room. Even Mr. Hollis, the bank manager, had emerged from his office, his eyes wide with disbelief. Elon leaned on the counter, his gaze steady. "I'd like to speak with someone about opening an account." Rebecca stumbled over herself. "Of course, right away, Mr. Musk. Please, this way." Elon didn't move. Instead, he glanced at Emma. "I'd prefer to work with her." Emma's breath caught in her throat. Rebecca opened her mouth to protest, but quickly snapped it shut under Elon's piercing gaze. "Of course," she muttered, stepping aside. Emma stood, forcing her hands to stay steady as she led Elon to her desk. "You sure know how to make an entrance," she whispered. Elon chuckled. "Gotta keep things interesting." She took a seat, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "So, what kind of account are we opening today?" Elon leaned in slightly, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "The kind that makes them sweat." Emma suppressed a smile, glancing up at him. "You're enjoying this way too much." "Maybe." He shrugged. "But it's not just for fun." Emma nodded, understanding what he meant. This wasn't just about a bank account. It was about shaking the system to its core. After a few moments, she finished entering the information. All set. She slid the paperwork toward him. Elon signed without hesitation. As he stood, he met Emma's gaze with something that felt like certainty. "See you soon," he said quietly before striding toward the exit. The moment he left, the bank erupted into frantic whispers. Rebecca rushed over, eyes wide with panic. "Emma, you knew who he was?" Emma shrugged, standing up and gathering her things. "I had a hunch." Rebecca gaped. "Do you have any idea what this means?" Emma smiled faintly. "Yeah, Ido." Without another word, she grabbed her purse and walked out the door, leaving Rebecca standing there, stunned. Outside, Elon was waiting near the curb, a black Tesla idling nearby. He opened the passenger door, raising an eyebrow. Coming. Emma hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. As the car pulled away, she looked back at the bank, the weight of everything that had happened settling deep in her chest. You ready for this? Elon asked, watching her carefully. Emma took a deep breath, meeting his gaze with newfound confidence. More than ever. And just like that, her life changed forever. The Tesla glided through the streets of Los Angeles. The hum of the electric motor barely audible over the sound of Emma's thoughts racing through her mind. The gravity of the moment was sinking in. She had just walked away from everything she knew, stepping into a world she could hardly comprehend. Elon sat in the driver's seat, effortlessly steering the car with one hand while the other drummed against the console in a rhythm only he understood. The city lights reflected off his calm expression, but Emma could sense the undercurrent of something more beneath the surface. Determination. Purpose. So, she finally spoke, breaking the silence. What happens now? Elon glanced at her, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Now we get to work. Emma exhaled, leaning back into the plush leather seat. And what exactly is the work? Elon's gaze flicked to her, his eyes sharp. Fixing the system. Emma scoffed, shaking her head. That's vague. He chuckled. All right, let's be specific. Banks like First Haven operate on a foundation of exclusivity. They're not built to help people. They're built to serve those who already have wealth. We're going to change that. Emma frowned. And how do you plan on doing that? Elon tapped the dashboard, and the car's interface lit up, revealing a map with several highlighted points scattered across the country. We're launching a series of financial hubs in underbanked communities. Real people, real needs. No barriers. No judgment. Just access. Emma stared at the screen, processing it all. That sounds amazing, but do you really think the big banks are just going to sit back and watch you disrupt their monopoly? Elon's smile widened. I'm counting on them not to. Let them fight it. That's how we win. Emma let out a breathless laugh, part disbelief, part admiration. You really think you can take on the entire financial industry? Elon glanced at her, his expression dead serious. No, Emma. We can. The weight of those words settled over her, heavier than she'd anticipated. This wasn't just about her taking a risk anymore. It was about stepping into a role that could actually make a difference. But why me? She asked softly, looking out the window at the city rolling by. You could have picked anyone. Elon was quiet for a moment before answering. Because when it mattered, you didn't look the other way. You didn't write me off. And that's the kind of thinking we need. Emma swallowed hard, a small smile playing on her lips. Guess I didn't realize I was signing up for revolutionizing the banking industry when I took this job. You didn't, Elon said, pulling the car into a sleek, modern office building with floor-to-ceiling windows. But you're here now. Emma stared up at the towering structure. What is this place? Elon parked and turned to her. Your new office. Her heart skipped a beat. My what? He pushed open the door and stepped out, motioning for her to follow. Inside, the building pulsed with energy. A diverse team of people moved through the space. Engineers, analysts, designers, all working with a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. It was like stepping into a world where ideas weren't just ideas, they were action. Elon led her down a glass corridor, past rooms filled with whiteboards scrawled with financial models and sticky notes covering every surface. Emma's eyes widened at the sheer scale of it all. This is incredible, she whispered. Elon nodded. It's just the beginning. We're building something from the ground up, a financial system that actually works for people, not against them. Emma glanced at the people around her. They were younger, sharper, driven. She suddenly felt out of place in her simple work blouse and heels. I don't know if I belong here, she admitted. Elon stopped walking and turned to face her fully. Emma, no one belongs anywhere until they decide they do. This place? It needs people like you. People who understand the system and want to break it apart piece by piece. She stared at him, feeling the weight of possibility pressing down on her. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't just another cog in a machine. She had a choice. Emma took a deep breath. All right, I'm in. Elon grinned. Good. Because we've got work to do. The following weeks flew by in a whirlwind. Emma found herself immersed in projects she never could have imagined. She worked closely with a team, designing an entirely new kind of financial infrastructure, one that didn't cater to the elite, but instead served the overlooked. The first major initiative? Mobile financial hubs, fully equipped vans that would travel to underserved communities, offering everything from checking accounts to financial literacy workshops. The idea was ambitious, but then again, so was Elon. Emma spent her days in meetings with developers, strategists, and community leaders. And every day, she felt herself growing, becoming more than the cautious employee she once was. But it wasn't without resistance. The big banks weren't blind to what was happening. News of Elon's experiment spread fast, and soon enough, the attacks began. Articles calling it idealistic, analysts dismissing it as unsustainable, and whispers of legal battles looming on the horizon. One afternoon, Emma sat across from Elon in his office, scrolling through an article that criticized their entire approach. She sighed, placing the tablet down. "They're coming after us hard." Elon leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful smile on his face. "Good. That means they're scared." Emma frowned. "Yeah, but what if they're right? What if this doesn't work?" Elon studied her for a moment. "It's not about whether it works right now, Emma. It's about making enough noise so they can't ignore us. And trust me, they're listening." She nodded slowly, taking in his unwavering confidence. It was infectious. As the months passed, the mobile financial hubs launched with tremendous success. Families who had been shut out of traditional banks were now gaining access to financial services they never thought possible. The stories poured in. Single mothers getting approved for small business loans, students opening their first savings accounts, elderly citizens finally feeling secure about their money. And through it all, Emma found herself at the center of the movement. From television interviews to speaking at conferences, she became the face of something that was bigger than herself. One day, as she stood outside one of the mobile units in a bustling community center, a woman approached her, a woman Emma recognized immediately. Rebecca, the same Rebecca who had dismissed Elon on that first day. She stood awkwardly, shifting on her heels. "Emma, I saw what you're doing. It's impressive." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Thanks." Rebecca hesitated. "Look, I was wrong about a lot of things." She glanced at the mobile unit, where families were lining up. Maybe banks like First Haven could learn a thing or two. Emma smiled. "Maybe they could." Rebecca nodded, offering a small smile before walking away. Emma watched her go, a sense of satisfaction blooming in her chest. Elon appeared beside her, watching the exchange. "Full circle, huh?" Emma laughed. "Yeah, feels good." He nodded. "It's only the beginning." And as they stood there, surrounded by the hum of possibility, Emma knew he was right. They weren't just fixing a broken system. They were building something entirely new. The following months were a whirlwind. What started as a quiet experiment had grown into a full-blown movement. The mobile financial hubs, sleek and efficient, rolled into neighborhoods that banks had long ignored, places where people had given up on the idea of financial security. Emma found herself at the heart of it all. She traveled from city to city, watching firsthand as families signed up for their first savings accounts, as small business owners secured loans that could change the trajectory of their lives. The gratitude in their eyes was something Emma could never have imagined while sitting behind a desk at First Haven Bank. But success brought enemies. The backlash from traditional financial institutions intensified. News channels buzzed with skepticism, branding Elon's initiative as idealistic at best, reckless at worst. Industry insiders questioned the sustainability of a model that prioritized accessibility over profits. Regulatory bodies began scrutinizing every move. And then came the ultimatum. One evening, Emma sat across from Elon in his office, scrolling through an email from a powerful banking consortium. It was filled with legal jargon, but the message was clear: back off or face the consequences. She set down the tablet, rubbing her temples. "They're scared," she murmured. Elon, leaning against his desk, smirked. "They should be." Emma looked up at him, worry etched across her face. "Elon, this isn't just about bad press anymore. They're pulling every string they can to shut us down. He crossed his arms. Let them try, she sighed, standing up. You know they won't stop until they crush us, right? Elon stepped closer, his eyes burning with determination. Emma, you're missing the point. They can't stop what's already started. People have seen what's possible. And once they see it, they'll never unsee it. Emma nodded slowly. So, what's the plan? He grinned. We go bigger. Days later, they were standing in front of an audience of hundreds at a financial summit in New York City. Investors, policymakers, and media elites filled the luxurious hall. Emma's palms were sweaty as she adjusted the mic, scanning the crowd. Elon nudged her gently. Ready? She took a deep breath. As I'll ever be. She stepped forward, the bright stage lights illuminating her face. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. We're not here to disrupt the system. We're here to fix what's broken. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Emma continued, her words gaining momentum. For too long, financial institutions have served the few and forgotten the many. We're here to change that, and we're not asking for permission. A few scattered applause, but most of the audience watched with thinly veiled skepticism. Emma smiled. Our mobile financial hubs have already reached thousands. People who were denied access to traditional banking now have the tools to build their futures. And this is just the beginning. Elon stepped up beside her. We're taking this global, he said, his voice sharp and commanding. We're partnering with communities, not corporations. We're proving that banking can be both ethical and profitable. That got their attention. Emma scanned the room, seeing the expressions shift from doubt to intrigue. And then, in the front row, she spotted a familiar face. Mr. Hollis, her former boss from First Haven Bank. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Emma saw something unexpected: respect. He nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement that she had done what he never could. After the presentation, a storm of reporters swarmed them. Questions flew from all directions. Mr. Musk, how do you plan to scale this globally? Emma, what challenges have you faced in transitioning from traditional banking? Are you worried about legal pushback? Emma answered them all with confidence she never thought she had. She spoke not just as an employee, but as someone who had lived through the system's flaws firsthand. Back at headquarters, the momentum continued to build. Every day, new investors lined up, eager to be part of something groundbreaking. Emma was now leading entire teams, mentoring new hires who looked at her the way she once looked at others, with hope and ambition. But not everything was easy. Expansion brought unforeseen obstacles, logistical nightmares, technological hiccups, and of course, constant regulatory red tape. One morning, as Emma reviewed a long list of compliance issues, Elon walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. You look like you're about to throw that laptop out the window, he teased. Emma groaned. Not about to, Elon. Already considering it. He handed her a cup. Remember why we're doing this? She smiled, shaking her head. I know. It's just overwhelming. Good, Elon said, leaning against her desk. If it were easy, everyone would be doing it. Emma took a deep sip of coffee. You have a way of making chaos sound inspiring. That's why I get paid the big bucks, Elon quipped with a grin. But later that night, as she sat alone in her apartment, staring at the spreadsheets piling up in her inbox, she wondered, was she in over her head? Could they really take on an entire industry and win? Then came the breakthrough. The team had been working on a new initiative, Equity First Bank, a fully operational, customer-first institution that would serve as the model for the future. No hidden fees, no barriers, just banking designed for people, not profits. The launch day was electric. Lines wrapped around the block as families, students, and small business owners poured into the sleek new building. Emma stood by the entrance, watching the sheer joy on people's faces. Elon stood beside her, arms crossed. Told you, he murmured. Emma laughed. All right, you win. Reporters swarmed them once again, and this time, Emma answered with ease. But the true victory came later that evening when an elderly woman approached Emma with tears in her eyes. I never thought I'd have a bank that actually cared about me, she whispered, clutching Emma's hand. Thank you. Emma blinked back the tears that threatened to spill over. That's why we're here. Elon watched, a satisfied grin on his face. I think you've got this, Emma. She turned to him. We've got this. Months passed, and Equity First Bank became more than just a success. It became a movement. People from across the country and the world were paying attention. Competitors were scrambling to adjust their business models. Governments were taking notice, and most importantly, lives were changing. One evening, Emma found herself back at the park where it all started. The bench where Elon had once sat in his ragged clothes, testing the world. She looked down at it, lost in thought, thinking about the past. Elon's voice startled her. She smiled. Yeah, it feels like a lifetime ago. He sat down beside her, handing her another cup of coffee. You've come a long way, you know. Emma laughed softly. And to think it all started with $20. Elon leaned back, gazing up at the stars. Funny how small things can turn into something much bigger. Emma nodded, her chest swelling with pride. What's next? Elon smirked. Global domination? She rolled her eyes. One step at a time, Musk. They sat in silence for a moment before Elon spoke again. You're not the same person who walked into First Haven. Emma thought about it and smiled. No, I'm not. And I don't think I ever want to be. Elon raised his coffee cup in a silent toast. To changing the world. Emma clinked hers against his. To never settling. And as they sat there, watching the city move around them, Emma knew that this was just the beginning. At its core, this story is a powerful reminder that change starts with a single act of courage. Emma's journey, from an overlooked bank trainee to a leader of a financial revolution, proves that true transformation happens when we dare to challenge the status quo. It's not about where you start, but about having the integrity to stand for what's right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Elon's social experiment exposed the harsh realities of systemic bias, but it also revealed the potential for compassion to break through the cracks of an unforgiving system. In a world that often values appearances over substance, this story highlights the importance of seeing people for who they are, not what they seem to be. Beyond the banking world, the broader lesson is clear. Every institution, no matter how established, can be redefined with the right vision and perseverance. The resistance faced by Emma and Elon serves as a stark reminder that pushing for meaningful change is never easy. There will always be obstacles, doubters, and naysayers. But the impact of their work proves that innovation, when driven by empathy and inclusivity, can revolutionize entire industries and empower those who have long been excluded. Ultimately, it's not about wealth or status. It's about using our influence to build systems that serve humanity rather than exploit it.